Imagine waking up after 2,500 years of darkness. Your last memory is the fury of battle, the weight of your chapter's secrets, pressing down on your consciousness like a physical thing. You remember the mission, always the mission. The Alpha Legion never truly dies, never truly surrenders. But when you wake, something is fundamentally wrong. The voices you hear aren't gothic. They're not even human. They're brutal, guttural, excited, orc voices, and they're coming from inside your war machine. This is the nightmare scenario we're exploring today. What happens when the galaxy's most secretive legion meets its most chaotic, unpredictable force? When an Alpha Legion Dreadnought, dormant for millennia, falls into the hands of orcs who see it not as a sacred relic or honored ancestor, but as the best new toy they've ever found. The answer is a horror story that transcends simple destruction. It's a violation of everything the Alpha Legion stands for, filtered through the unique nightmare. That is orc technology. To understand the full scope of this catastrophe, we need to understand all the pieces. We need to know what the Alpha Legion truly is, what it means to be entombed in a dreadnought, and what makes orcs uniquely terrifying when they get their hands on Imperial technology. Only then can we comprehend the full scope of what happens when these elements collide in the most unfortunate way possible. The Alpha Legion. Secrets within secrets. The Alpha Legion isn't just another traitor legion. They're the question mark at the end of every sentence in Warhammer 40,000 lore. When the Emperor created 20 Space Marine legions during the Great Crusade, each had its purpose, its specialty, its role in the grand design. The Ultramarines were the tacticians, the model sons. The World Eaters were the berserkers, the close combat specialists. The Thousand Sons were the sorcerers. But the Alpha Legion was something different entirely. They were the 20th Legion, and from their very inception, they existed in shadow. Where other legions fought with overwhelming force or tactical brilliance that was recorded for all to see, the Alpha Legion preferred methods that left no witnesses, no evidence, no certainty. They were the masters of infiltration, of misdirection, of fighting wars where the enemy never knew they were under attack until it was far too late. Their victories were ghost stories, whispered about, but never confirmed. What makes the Alpha Legion truly unique among all the traitor legions is their fundamental approach to warfare. While the World Eaters charged forward in berserker rage and the Death Guard ground down their enemies through attrition, the Alpha Legion fought wars that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. They didn't just defeat armies, they corrupted governments, turned populations against their rulers, made allies fight each other, and ensured that by the time their actual forces arrived, the battle was already won. They were playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, and they'd rigged the board before the game even started. Their Primarch situation alone tells you everything you need to know about how this legion operates. Alfarius Omegon wasn't just one Primarch, but two identical twins, and the legion kept this secret even from the other legions. When one of them would appear, claiming to be Alfarius, no one could be certain if they were speaking to the real Primarch or not. Even more confusingly, the Alpha Legion had a practice where any of their warriors might claim to be Alfarius. "I am Alfarius" became both their war cry and the perfect embodiment of their philosophy. Everyone was Alfarius. No one was Alfarius. Identity itself became a weapon. During the Horus Heresy, when half the legions turned against the Emperor, the Alpha Legion sided with Horus. But even this decision is shrouded in mystery and contradiction. Unlike the clear motivations of other traitor legions, the Alpha Legion's reasons for joining Chaos remain unclear even 10,000 years later. Some sources suggest they were manipulated by the Cabal, a shadowy Xenos organization that showed them a vision where Chaos could only be defeated if Horus won the heresy. Others suggest they were playing a deeper game, infiltrating the traitor legions to sabotage them from within. Still others claim they never truly fell to Chaos at all, remaining loyal to the Emperor while appearing to serve the Dark Gods. The truth? No one knows. That's exactly how the Alpha Legion wants it. This fundamental uncertainty extends to everything about the Legion. Their color scheme is a shifting metallic blue-green that seems to change depending on the light, perfectly embodying their mutable nature. Their symbol is the Hydra, the multi-headed serpent. Cut off one head, two more take its place. It's not just imagery, it's operational doctrine. Every Alpha Legion cell operates with extreme independence, pursuing objectives that might seem contradictory, but somehow serve a larger plan that no single member fully understands. What does this mean for a Dreadnought of the Alpha Legion? It means the warrior entombed within isn't just carrying the weight of his chapter's honor. He's carrying secrets, dozens of them, hundreds perhaps, code phrases, hidden contacts, sleeper agents scattered across the galaxy, strategic plans that might not come to fruition for centuries. The Alpha Legion doesn't just fight wars. They plant seeds of future conflicts, set up dominoes that might not fall until generations after they're gone. An Alpha Legion Dreadnought isn't just a walking weapons platform. It's a walking vault of classified information. Every veteran Dreadnought pilot in other chapters is valued for their wisdom and battlefield experience. An Alpha Legion Dreadnought has all that, plus potentially galaxy-altering intelligence. They remember not just battles, but infiltrations. Not just victories, but manipulations that toppled entire planetary governments. They know where the bodies are buried, both literally and figuratively. This makes them incredibly valuable to the Alpha Legion, which is why they would go to extraordinary lengths to recover a fallen Dreadnought. But it also makes them incredibly dangerous if captured. The amount of actionable intelligence contained within a single Alpha Legion Dreadnought's memory could compromise operations across multiple sectors, expose sleeper cells that have been in place for millennia, and unravel plots that won't even begin for centuries. The Alpha Legion's operational methods also mean their Dreadnoughts are used differently than those of other chapters. While an Ultramarines Dreadnought might be awakened for major battles where their firepower and experience are needed on the front lines, an Alpha Legion Dreadnought might be awakened for very specific missions. Assassinations, infiltrations into enemy strongholds, operations where their unique knowledge and capabilities make them irreplaceable. They're not just honored ancestors, they're precision instruments deployed only when necessary. This leads to longer periods of dormancy between activations. Where a Blood Angel's Dreadnought might be awakened every few decades for major conflicts, an Alpha Legion Dreadnought might sleep for centuries between missions, awakened only when their specific expertise is absolutely required. This extended sleep has its own psychological consequences, which we'll explore in depth later. For now, understand that an Alpha Legion Dreadnought is used to long periods of darkness, but those periods are chosen, controlled, part of a larger strategy. The Legion's tactical doctrine also shapes how their Dreadnoughts are modified and equipped. While other chapters might favor heavy assault weapons for their Dreadnoughts, turning them into walking tanks, Alpha Legion Dreadnoughts are often equipped for more specialized roles, stealth systems that seem impossible for something so large, sophisticated scanning equipment for intelligence gathering, weapons designed for precision strikes rather than mass destruction. They're built to support the Alpha Legion's preferred methods of warfare, which means they're built differently than their counterparts in other legions. There's also the question of loyalty, which for the Alpha Legion is never straightforward. When we talk about a Dreadnought that's been asleep for 2,500 years, we're talking about a warrior who was interred during or shortly after the Horus Heresy. This is someone who made the choice to side with Horus, or who appeared to make that choice, or who was following orders that might have been designed to make it look like they made that choice. Their loyalty might be to Chaos, to the Emperor, to the Alpha Legion itself, or to some incomprehensible plan that transcends traditional notions of allegiance. This uncertainty means that, even if the Dreadnought were recovered by the Alpha Legion, there would be questions. Has the plan changed in 2,500 years? Are the missions they remember still relevant? Do the code phrases they carry still work? The galaxy is a very different place than it was during the heresy. The Imperium has changed. Chaos has evolved. The Alpha Legion itself has fractured into countless warbands, each pursuing their own interpretation of the Legion's goals. But all this careful planning and strategic brilliance and multi-layered deception becomes completely irrelevant when the Dreadnought falls into Ork hands. Because Orks don't care about your plans. They don't respect your secrets. They don't even understand the concept of subtlety. They see a big metal box that shoots things and make loud noises, and they think, "That's proper Orky that is, let's make it shootier." The Walking Tomb, understanding Dreadnoughts. To truly grasp the horror of what happens to this Alpha Legion warrior, we need to understand what it means to be a Dreadnought. The Imperium calls it an honor. The greatest heroes, they say, those too valuable to lose but too broken to save, are granted the privilege of continued service. They're interred within a Dreadnought chassis, their shattered bodies encased in blessed machinery, given new purpose as walking engines of destruction. The chapter's chaplains speak of it in reverent tones. The Tech Marines treat it as sacred duty. To be chosen for entombment is to be deemed worthy of immortality. But immortality is not always a gift. Sometimes, it's the cruelest curse imaginable. The process of creating a Dreadnought begins with a Space Marine who has suffered catastrophic injuries. We're not talking about losing a limb or even multiple limbs. We're talking about injuries so severe that even the Space Marine's remarkable biology and the Apothecarion's advanced medical technology cannot save them. A crushed torso, a shattered spine, organs pulverized, beyond repair. The kind of injuries where the warrior is effectively dead, except for that small spark of consciousness that still flickers in their brain. The decision to enter a Space Marine in a Dreadnought is never made lightly. The chapter must deem them valuable enough that losing their experience and knowledge would be a genuine blow to the chapter's capabilities. They must also have access to a Dreadnought chassis, which are themselves ancient and irreplaceable relics. But most importantly, the warrior must have the mental fortitude to survive what comes next. What comes next is butchery dressed up as surgery. The apothecaries and Tech Marines work together in a procedure that would kill anyone who wasn't a Space Marine, and still comes close even with their enhanced physiology. Everything that's damaged beyond repair is removed. Arms, legs, lower torso, sometimes even more. What remains is essentially a sack of vital organs, a spine and a brain, all kept barely alive through a combination of life support systems and the Space Marines' own incredible resilience. This remnant of a warrior is then placed within an amniotic sarcophagus, a tank filled with dense, oily fluid that sustains what's left of their biological functions. The sarcophagus becomes their entire world. The fluid fills their lungs. They breathe it, are sustained by it, float in it. Neural interfaces are jacked directly into their spine and brain, creating a connection between their consciousness and the Dreadnought's machine spirit. Through these interfaces, they learn to control the Dreadnought as if it were their own body. The weapons become their arms. The sensors become their eyes. The armor plating becomes their skin. In theory, they become one with the machine. In practice, it's a waking nightmare. Imagine losing all physical sensation. You can't feel your fingers because you don't have fingers. You can't feel your face because your face is submerged in amniotic fluid. Every sense you once had is gone, replaced by artificial inputs that are similar but fundamentally wrong. When a Dreadnought sees, they're not seeing light through eyes. They're receiving processed data from Auspex scanners and optical sensors. When they hear, it's through audio pickups that translate sound into electrical signals their brain interprets. Touch becomes pressure sensors on armor plating. Taste and smell are completely gone. The psychological impact is immediate and profound. Space Marines are trained to endure any hardship, to overcome any obstacle, to never surrender no matter the odds. But this isn't a challenge you can overcome through willpower. This is your new existence. You're trapped in a box, floating in darkness, experiencing the world through mechanical intermediaries. And you will never leave this box. Never feel the sun on your skin again. Never taste food. Never know the comfort of sleep in the normal sense. Because dreadnoughts don't truly sleep. Between battles, when they're not needed, they're placed in a form of stasis. The chapter's tech marines shut down most of their systems, putting the pilot into a state of suspended animation that's meant to preserve them for future conflicts. But it's not restful sleep. It's not even unconsciousness in the traditional sense. Many dreadnought pilots report experiencing a kind of half-awareness during stasis, a twilight state where time loses meaning and dreams become indistinguishable from memories. The duration of these stasis periods varies wildly. A dreadnought might be awakened every few decades for major conflicts, or they might sleep for centuries if their specific capabilities aren't required. Each time they wake, they're confronted with the same horror. The realization that they're still trapped, that the nightmare continues, that brothers they fought beside are now dead and forgotten, replaced by young warriors who view them not as comrades, but as relics. This is where the madness begins. Not all dreadnought pilots succumb to insanity, but many do. Some wake screaming, their mechanical voices crackling with incoherent rage. They have to be restrained, their weapons locked down, while chaplains perform ceremonies to calm their fractured minds. Others become cold and distant, all emotion stripped away by centuries of isolation. They perform their duties with machine-like precision because they've essentially become machines. The human parts of them have been worn away by time and trauma until only the warrior remains. Some develop what the tech marines call quirks, a dreadnought that laughs at inappropriate times, the sound rendered as the cycling of autocannon rounds. Another that speaks only in ancient battle cant that no living space marine remembers learning. These quirks are their consciousness trying to assert some form of individuality, some proof that they're still alive in a meaningful sense. But they're also symptoms of deterioration, evidence that the organic brain is slowly breaking down under the strain of existence within the chassis. The ones who fare best are those who maintain some sense of purpose beyond mere violence. Venerable dreadnoughts, who are consulted for their wisdom, who serve as living links to their chapter's history, tend to retain more of their sanity. The act of being treated as a person, of being asked for counsel rather than just deployed as a weapon, helps anchor their humanity. But even they know the truth. They're dying by degrees, their minds eroding like stone beneath endless rain. The question is only how long they can hold out. For loyalist chapters, there are at least safeguards. The stasis systems are well maintained. The tech marines perform regular checks. The chaplains provide spiritual guidance. Dreadnoughts are awakened for important chapter ceremonies, not just battles, giving them some connection to their chapter's ongoing life. It's still horrific, but there's structure, care, reverence. For chaos, dreadnoughts, it's infinitely worse. Without the stasis systems that loyalist chapters maintain, chaos dreadnoughts remain partially conscious during dormancy. They're aware, trapped in darkness, unable to move or communicate, sometimes for centuries at a stretch. The exposure to chaos energies warps their minds and sometimes their physical forms. The pilot might meld with the chassis in unnatural ways, flesh growing through metal, demonic entities taking residence in the machine. They're not just going mad from isolation, they're being actively corrupted by the very powers their legion serves. This is why chaos dreadnoughts are usually kept in chains when not in battle. They're so consumed by rage and madness that they'll attack anything that moves, including their own allies. Being interred in a chaos dreadnought isn't an honor. It's a punishment, a way to get rid of a defeated rival while still extracting some use from their combat capabilities. The pilot knows this. They know. They've been condemned to a hell that will last until someone finally destroys their chassis. And that knowledge, that certainty of their abandonment, drives them even deeper into insanity. Now consider an Alpha Legion Dreadnought. They have all the standard psychological burdens of entombment, but with additional complications unique to their legion. They carry secrets that might be the only copies in existence, strategic intelligence that's critically important. They need to maintain operational security even in their thoughts, because they never know who might be listening, who might have access to their systems. The paranoia that's fundamental to Alpha Legion operations doesn't go away when you're entombed. If anything, it gets worse, and they're alone with it. Utterly, completely alone. At least a Blood Angel's Dreadnought can share stories with his brothers when he's awakened. An Ultramarine can discuss tactics with his chapter master. But an Alpha Legion warrior in a summoned Dreadnought, they can't trust anyone with what they know. They can't share the burden. Every secret they carry, every piece of intelligence, every contingency plan, it all stays locked inside their mind, crushing down on their consciousness with the weight of centuries. The psychological toll is staggering, and it's about to get so much worse. Because when this particular Dreadnought wakes up, it won't be in a fortress monastery surrounded by brothers who understand what they are and what they represent. It will be in an Ork workshop, surrounded by crude, violent Xenos, who see them as nothing more than a fun project. Everything that makes them a Dreadnought, everything that makes them Alpha Legion, every shred of meaning they've managed to maintain through millennia of isolation is about to be violated in ways they never imagined possible. The long sleep, 2,500 years of darkness. Let's focus now on our specific Dreadnought and their journey to this catastrophic moment. This warrior was interred sometime during the Horus Heresy or shortly after, which places their entombment around the year 30,000 to 31,000 in the Imperial calendar. They've been dormant for roughly 2,500 years, which means they've slept through a staggering amount of galactic history. To put this in perspective, 2,500 years ago, in our own timeline, the Roman Empire didn't exist. The pyramids were ancient monuments from a bygone age. The world was fundamentally different. The galaxy of Warhammer 40,000 has changed just as dramatically. When this warrior was first interred, the Horus Heresy had just concluded or was still raging. The Imperium was reeling from civil war. Primarchs still walked among their legions. The Emperor sat upon the golden throne, not yet the dried corpse sustained by 10,000 psyker sacrifices per day that he is in the 41st millennium. The rules of the galaxy were being rewritten in real time. This was a universe in flux, where anything seemed possible. The warrior inside. This Dreadnought experienced those times. They fought in battles where the fate of humanity hung in the balance. They witnessed events that would become legends. They received orders directly from Alpharius, or from someone claiming to be Alpharius, which for the Alpha Legion amounts to the same thing. They were part of grand strategies that were supposed to unfold over millennia. They carried vital intelligence about those plans. Then they were damaged in battle, mortally wounded in circumstances we can only speculate about. Perhaps they were leading an infiltration mission behind enemy lines when it went catastrophically wrong. Maybe they were sacrificing themselves to ensure other operatives escaped with crucial intelligence. Or possibly, they were the victim of internal Legion politics, placed in a position to fail as part of some larger scheme. For the Alpha Legion, even being mortally wounded might be part of the plan. Whatever the cause, they were deemed valuable enough to preserve. The Legion's warpsmiths and Dark Mechanicum allies performed the grisly surgery. The warrior was sealed into their sarcophagus, installed in the ancient Contemptor chassis that would become their new body. They were brought online, given time to acclimate to their new existence, and then deployed. Given the Alpha Legion's methods, they were probably used for specialized missions. Assassinations, deep infiltrations, operations where their particular experience and capabilities made them irreplaceable, and then they went to sleep. We don't know exactly why they entered dormancy. Perhaps the mission was complete, and they were placed in stasis until needed again. Maybe the warband they were serving with was destroyed, and they were hidden away for safekeeping. Or possibly it was deliberate. a long-term strategic deployment where they were meant to sleep for centuries before being awakened at a predetermined time to continue a mission that required such patience. What we know is that the awakening never came. Not from their legion anyway. 2,500 years. Multiply a human lifetime by 30, and you're approaching this duration. It's incomprehensible. During stasis, Dreadnought pilots don't experience time the same way we do. For them, it's not 2,500 years of conscious waiting. But it's not simple unconsciousness either. It's a twilight existence, a half-aware dreaming state where memories blur together and time loses cohesion. Imagine your dreams, but stretched across centuries. Events from different periods of your life mixing together. Conversations with people long dead, feeling as real as yesterday. Battles you fought decades apart, suddenly happening simultaneously. Your sense of self becoming fuzzy at the edges, because you're not sure anymore which memories are real and which are dreams constructed from fragments of real memories. This is existence in stasis. This is what the warrior inside our Dreadnought has been experiencing. But they're still an Alpha Legion warrior, which means even in their dreams, they're paranoid. Even in stasis, some part of their consciousness is maintaining operational security. They can't fully let go because they carry too many secrets. Code phrases that might still be relevant. Sleeper agents who might still be in position. Strategic plans that might still be unfolding. They can't risk talking in their sleep, so to speak, because the enemy might be listening. This creates a peculiar form of psychological torture. They can't fully rest because they're always guarding secrets, but they can't fully wake either because they're in stasis. They exist in a state between states, neither sleeping nor waking. Their consciousness trying to maintain operational integrity while having no operational capacity whatsoever. It's like being locked in a sensory deprivation tank for 2,500 years, while trying to remember classified information you can never write down. During this long sleep, the galaxy moved on without them. The Horus heresy ended. The traitor legions fled to the Eye of Terror. The Imperium entered the Long War, 10,000 years of grinding conflict against chaos, xenos, and internal corruption. The Alpha Legion itself fragmented into countless warbands, each pursuing their own interpretation of the Legion's goals. Some claim to serve chaos. Others insist they remain loyal to the Emperor. Most keep their true allegiances obscure because that's what the Alpha Legion does. Technologies were lost. Worlds were conquered, lost, and reconquered. Entire sectors of space became uninhabitable. New threats emerged. The Tyranids arrived from beyond the galactic rim. The Necrons began waking from their 60 million year sleep. Tau rose from primitives to a spacefaring empire. Chaos cults spread like cancer through the Imperium's bloated corpus. The galaxy became, if anything, even more dangerous and chaotic than it was during the heresy. And our Dreadnoughts slept through all of it. They don't know that the strategies they memorized are probably obsolete. They don't know that the sleeper agents they have coordinates for are almost certainly dead, their cover identities forgotten by everyone except this single dreaming consciousness. They don't know that the codes they carry might no longer work. The recognition phrases might no longer be recognized. They're like a time capsule from an earlier age, carrying information that might be historically interesting, but operationally useless. Except you can't tell them that. The Alpha Legion doesn't accept obsolescence. Every piece of intelligence, no matter how old, might have relevance. Every contingency plan, no matter how outdated it seems, might still be viable. That's the curse of being an Alpha Legion operative. You can never fully let go of anything because you never know when it might become important again. This mindset is taxing enough when you're active. When you're trapped in a Dreadnought sarcophagus, it becomes a special kind of hell. Now let's talk about what happens to Dreadnought systems during prolonged dormancy. Stasis is supposed to preserve everything perfectly. The pilot's biological components, the machine systems, all of it should remain unchanged no matter how long the stasis lasts. In theory, in practice, things degrade. The stasis systems themselves require maintenance. Power cells can fail. Seals can deteriorate. In a well-maintained fortress monastery with dedicated tech marines, these issues are caught and corrected. But our Dreadnought isn't in a fortress monastery. They're in some forgotten cache, some hidden depot, some abandoned facility where the Alpha Legion stashed them for retrieval later. Later never came. So slow degradation sets in. The stasis field becomes less perfect. Microscopic variations in the temperature, slight fluctuations in the amniotic fluid's composition, the neural interfaces experiencing minor erosion. None of it enough to wake the pilot, or kill them, but enough to introduce errors, glitches, inconsistencies. The dreams become stranger, the memories less reliable. The line between what's real and what's imagined grows increasingly blurred. And still they sleep. Still they dream. Still, they wait for the awakening that they assume will come from their legion. They're an Alpha Legion warrior. They have training and indoctrination that makes them incredibly resilient. They've been taught to endure any hardship for the mission, even if the mission is simply to exist until needed. But they were never taught how to handle what's about to happen. No amount of training, no depth of indoctrination can prepare you for the moment when you wake up to orc voices discussing which bits of your chassis look the most orky. No Alpha Legion contingency plan covers captured by Xenos who think you're a fun mechanical toy to take apart and rebuild. The galaxy's most secretive warrior, carrying intelligence that might reshape sectors, trapped in a machine that's been dormant for 2,500 years, is about to encounter the galaxy's least subtle, most destructively enthusiastic force. And the worst part, in their half-dreaming state, they have no idea it's coming. They're probably dreaming of standing orders, of ancient missions, of brothers long dead. They're maintaining their mental discipline, guarding their secrets, preparing to wake to the familiar, if unpleasant process of reactivation by their tech marines. Instead, they're about to wake to something no Alpha Legion operative has ever had to face. Complete and utter loss of control at the hands of beings who don't even understand the concept of secrets. The Green Tide. Understanding Orks. To understand what's about to happen to our unfortunate Dreadnought, we need to understand Orks, not just who they are, but what they are fundamentally. Orks are perhaps the most unique faction in Warhammer 40,000 because they operate on principles that seem to violate the basic laws of physics. They shouldn't work. Their technology shouldn't function. Their entire civilization should have collapsed into chaos long ago. But they thrive specifically because they don't understand that they shouldn't. Orks are genetically engineered warrior organisms created millions of years ago by the Old Ones, the same ancient race that created the Elder. The Old Ones needed soldiers for their war against the Satan and Necrons, so they created the Krork, massively powerful war forms designed for one purpose: fighting. Over millions of years, the Krork devolved or evolved, depending on your perspective, into modern Orks. They lost much of their sophistication, but retained their fundamental nature. They're living weapons, designed at the genetic level to wage war. But here's where it gets weird. Orks reproduce through spores. When an orc dies, or even just sheds skin cells, it releases microscopic fungal spores. These spores grow in any suitable environment, and what they grow into depends on the psychic field generated by nearby orcs. In the presence of a strong orc presence, the spores will develop into new orcs, but they can also develop into other things. Gretchen, the smaller goblin-like creatures that serve as orc slaves and assistants. Squigs, bizarre beast organisms that orcs use for various purposes. Even certain types of fungi that orcs eat or use for other functions. This means orcs don't have reproduction in the traditional sense. They don't have families. They don't raise children. They don't build civilizations that require generational continuity. They simply exist, emerging from spore-infested soil, already knowing how to speak, how to fight, and what their role in orc society will be. It's all encoded in their genetic memory, hardwired instincts passed down from the original Krork. This genetic memory is crucial to understanding Ork technology. Within every Ork population, certain individuals emerge with specialized knowledge. These are the odd boys, Orks with genetic predispositions towards specific roles. Pain boys understand biology and surgery, at least in the crude, brutal Ork way. Runthirds know how to manage Gretchen and Squigs. And most relevant to our story, mech boys understand technology. Mech boys, also called mechs, are the Ork equivalent of tech marines or engineers, but they don't learn their trade. They don't study mechanics or attend technical schools. They're born knowing, or rather, they grow from spores with instinctive understanding of how machines work. When a mech boy looks at a pile of scrap metal, they instinctively know how to turn it into a functional weapon or vehicle. They don't understand why it works. They just know that if they weld this bit to that bit and hit it with a hammer a few times, it'll work. This brings us to the most important and most controversial aspect of Ork culture, the Wah field. Orks have a latent psychic ability that manifests as a collective field. Individual Orks have no psychic power, but when enough Orks gather together, they generate a psychic field that can actually influence reality. This is the Wah field, and it's responsible for the single most important fact about Ork technology. If enough Orks believe something works, it will work, even if by conventional physics it shouldn't. Now, this has been exaggerated in the fandom to silly levels. You'll see jokes about Ork guns that are literally just metal tubes painted to look like guns, firing bullets because the Orks believe they should. That's not accurate. Ork technology still needs to be recognizably functional. A mech boy can't just pick up a stick, paint it red, and have it work as a flamethrower, but a crudely welded assemblage of scrap metal that vaguely resembles a gun and has some of the right components, even if they're assembled incorrectly. That'll work for Orks, when it would just explode or jam for anyone else. The Wah field fills in the gaps. It smooths over the engineering errors. It makes the impossible merely unlikely, and the unlikely reasonably probable. This is why Ork technology is so dangerous and so frustrating to the Imperium. Orks can take battlefield salvage, weld it together in ways that make tech marines weep, and field functioning weapons within hours. They don't need supply lines or manufacturing facilities. They just need scrap metal and mech boys. There's also their color theory, which operates on similar principles. Orks know that red vehicles go faster, yellow ammunition is more explodey, and blue is lucky. Does painting a vehicle red actually make it faster? For Orks, yes. The Wah field makes it so. Does it work for humans who capture Ork vehicles? No, because they don't have the Wah field. But for Orks, belief becomes reality in subtle but measurable ways. Now let's talk about Ork psychology, which is crucial to understanding what they'll do with a captured Dreadnought. Orks live for fighting. It's not a cultural value. It's not a choice. It's their genetic purpose. They experience joy, genuine euphoria, from violence and combat. The bigger and more dangerous the fight, the happier they are. An Ork who goes too long without a good scrap will become depressed and irritable. But give them a proper battle, and they're having the time of their lives. This makes them terrifying enemies because they can't be intimidated. You can't make them surrender through overwhelming force, because overwhelming force is exactly what they want to fight against. Threaten them with death, and they'll laugh and charge at you. Offer them peace, and they'll be insulted and probably attack you anyway. The only way to stop Orks is to kill them, and even then, their spores will ensure more Orks eventually grow in that location. Their social structure is based entirely on size and violence. The biggest, strongest Orks become nobs, the leaders of mobs of lesser Orks, called boys. Multiple nobs might follow an even bigger Ork called a warboss. When a warboss gets big enough and mean enough, they can call a Wah, gathering Orks from across multiple worlds into a massive invasion force. The Wah field grows stronger with more Orks, which makes their weapons work better, which makes them win more fights, which makes the War bigger in a self-reinforcing cycle that can only be stopped by killing enough Orks to break the momentum. But Orks aren't mindless. They're intelligent, just in a very alien way. They have culture, humor, even philosophy of a sort. They just apply it all through the lens of violence. They respect strength and cunning, admire good engineering in a crude sort of way, and genuinely enjoy tinkering with technology to make it more orky. This brings us to Ork looting culture. Orks love finding enemy equipment and modifying it for their own use. Captured Imperial tanks become looted wagons, festooned with extra guns and armor plates welded on at random angles. Captured weapons are prized, not just for their utility, but for the prestige of having taken them from a defeated enemy. The more impressive the original owner, the better the loot. And dreadnoughts are very impressive. Even Orks recognize the power of these walking war machines. They've fought against loyalist dreadnoughts and lost plenty of boys to their guns. They know these things are tough, well-armed, and valuable. Finding an intact or mostly intact dreadnought would be like finding treasure for any Ork warband. But Orks don't just use captured equipment as is. That would be un-Orky. They modify everything to suit their aesthetic and their needs. More guns, bigger guns, spikes, paint, extra armor plates, whatever makes it look and work more Orky. This is where mech boys really shine. They'll take carefully designed Imperial technology and remake it in the Ork image. And somehow, through a combination of crude skill and the Wah field's reality-bending influence, it still works. Now imagine this process, applied to a dreadnought. A holy relic of a Space Marine chapter, containing the preserved remains of a revered hero, filled with advanced technology that the Adeptus Mechanicus treats with religious reverence. Orks would see it as the coolest toy ever, and immediately start pulling it apart to see how it works and what they can add to it. They wouldn't understand or care about its significance. They wouldn't know or care that there's a living warrior inside, still conscious, still experiencing everything. They would just see a big metal box full of interesting bits that go boom, and they would be absolutely delighted to tinker with it. This is the nightmare our Alpha Legion dreadnought is about to wake up to. Not destruction, which would at least be quick. Not even corruption, which they might understand from their time fighting for or with chaos. No, they're about to experience something no Alpha Legion operative is trained for. Being treated like a toy by enthusiastic children who, happen to be 7 foot tall, green-skinned murder machines with hammers. The War and the discovery. Our story begins, as so many tragedies do, with pure chance. Somewhere in the galaxy's vast, chaotic expanse, an Ork War is gathering strength. This particular War is led by Warboss Gutrippa, an unusually large and vicious Ork who spent the last several years beating rival Orks into submission and gathering a fleet. His War isn't the largest in recent memory, but it's substantial. Dozens of ramshackle ships, thousands of Orks, all spoiling for a good fight. They're heading toward an Imperial sector that's been having its own problems. Wars with Chaos warbands, Tyrannid splinter fleets probing the borders, and general administrative collapse have left many worlds vulnerable. The Orks smell weakness, and like sharks sensing blood in the water, they're coming to feed on the chaos. But space is vast beyond human comprehension, and Ork navigation is, to put it charitably, imprecise. They use warp travel like everyone else, but Ork warpheads, their navigator equivalents, operate more on instinct than calculation. They can sense where the fighting is, where the War needs to go, but they're not particularly good at plotting exact courses. This means Ork fleets often drop out of the warp in unexpected places. In this case, Gutrippa's fleet emerges from the warp near a system that doesn't appear on any current Imperial charts. The system is listed as destroyed in ancient records, sterilized during the Horus Heresy, and left as a dead monument to that brutal civil war. But the records are wrong, or at least incomplete. The system wasn't destroyed. It was abandoned, and in its ruins, hidden in the shattered remnants of a fortress that might have belonged to the Alpha Legion. Our Dreadnought has been sleeping. The Orks aren't looking for it. They're not even supposed to be in this system. They're here because their warp head got them turned around. And now, they need to figure out where they are and where they should be going. But Orks can't pass up an opportunity for looting, and those ruins down on the third planet look properly fortified. Where there are fortifications, there's loot. Where there's loot, there's fun. A boarding party is assembled. This is a relatively modest force by Ork standards, maybe 50 boys, led by a knob named Skargul, along with a handful of looters, burner boys, and one particularly enterprising mech boy called Zagdaka. They take a ramshackle landing craft down to the surface, crushing through what's left of the atmosphere, and make a characteristically subtle landing that involves crashing through several walls before coming to a stop. The ruins are old, millennia old. Whatever happened here during the heresy, it left the fortress in ruins but still partially intact. The Orks spread out, searching for anything valuable or interesting. They find both ancient weapons, long since depleted of power, armor fragments, that might be worth salvaging, scattered bones that could be human or space marine. The Orks don't care enough to differentiate. And then they find the chamber. It's deep in the ruins, protected by doors that have sealed shut over the centuries. The Orks don't bother trying to unlock them. They just plant explosives and blow the doors off their hinges. The room beyond is dark, lit only by the Orks' crude lamps, but even in the darkness, the shape is unmistakable. A Contemptor-pattern Dreadnought, slightly smaller than Imperial Knights, but still massive by infantry standards, stands in the center of the chamber. Its armor bears the Hydra symbol of the Alpha Legion, though layers of dust and corrosion have dulled the colors. The sarcophagus in its chest appears intact. The weapons, a close combat claw on one arm and what looks like a multi-melter on the other, are still attached. Most importantly to the Orks, it looks like it might still work. Zagdaka, the mech boy, approaches the Dreadnought with the kind of reverence other Orks reserve for particularly large explosions. His genetic knowledge is screaming at him that this is advanced technology, the kind that mech boys dream about getting their hands on. He starts circling it, examining connection points, access panels, the general condition of the chassis. Skargul, the knob in charge, is less interested in the technical details and more interested in whether they can make it work. "Can we fix it, Zaggy? Make it proper Orky?" Skargul's voice echoes in the chamber. Zagdaka is already pulling out tools, crude implements that shouldn't work for delicate technical examination, but do anyway because he's an Ork, and he believes they should. He pries open an access panel and peers inside, seeing systems he doesn't consciously understand, but that his genetic memory assures him can be worked with. "Yeah, boss. This is good stuff. Real good stuff. Better than anything we got. We take this back to the workshop, make it shootier, and we got ourselves a proper dread thing." The decision is made immediately, as Ork decisions usually are. They'll take the Dreadnought. Getting it back to the ship is a challenge because the thing weighs several tons, and Orks aren't known for their careful handling of delicate objects. They end up using a combination of brute force, questionable engineering, and more explosives than strictly necessary to extract the Dreadnought from the ruins and get it to their landing craft. The Dreadnought is loaded into the craft's cargo hold, secured with chains that look insufficient for the job, but somehow hold. During the ascent to orbit, the landing craft nearly crashes twice, but the Orks are laughing the whole time because near-death experiences are fun when you're an Ork. They make it back to the main fleet ship, where the Dreadnought is transported to what the Orks generously call their workshop. The workshop is organized chaos, which for Orks is just chaos with slightly more functional outcomes. Scrap metal is piled everywhere. Half-finished projects sit abandoned when something more interesting came along. Weapons in various states of assembly hang from hooks or lean against walls. And in the center of it all, they place the Dreadnought. Warboss Gutrippa comes to inspect the find. He's impressed. He doesn't understand what a Dreadnought is in the technical sense, but he knows it's a war machine and it looks impressive. More importantly, Having something this substantial to show off increases his prestige. Other orcs will be jealous. They'll want one too. This makes him look like a better war boss, which solidifies his position. This is proper loot, boys. You done good. Zaggy, make it work. Make it dead killy. I want that thing stomping around causing trouble when we hit the next planet. Zagdaka is already assembling his tools and calling for his assistance. A motley crew of lesser mech boys and Gretchen who will do the actual tedious work while he supervises and handles the complicated bits. They start examining the Dreadnought more thoroughly, probing its systems, trying to understand how it works. None of them know there's someone inside. They see the sarcophagus as just another component, a weird box at the center of the machine. They don't recognize it as a life support system. They don't realize that inside that box, suspended in amniotic fluid, the broken remnants of a space marine warrior are locked in millennia-long stasis. They don't know that their poking and prodding is causing fluctuations in the stasis field, that their crude attempts to access the power systems are sending irregular pulses through the neural interfaces, that they're accidentally, slowly, beginning to wake something that hasn't been conscious in 2,500 years. And they definitely don't know that what they're waking up is an Alpha Legion operative carrying secrets that could compromise operations across entire sectors of space. They just know they found a cool, new toy, and they're excited to start playing with it. Inside the sarcophagus, in the twilight between stasis and consciousness, something begins to stir. Memories surface from the darkness, the last battle, the moment of damage, the surgery. Then, nothing, or not quite nothing. Dreams that might be memories, memories that might be dreams, time without meaning. And now, faintly, distantly, awareness begins to return. Something is wrong. The awakening feels wrong. The voices aren't right. The procedures aren't being followed. Alarm tries to penetrate the fog of stasis, but consciousness is still too fragmented to fully grasp what's happening. The warrior inside knows only that they're waking up, and it's not supposed to be like this. The Orks, oblivious to the nightmare they're about to unleash for this poor soul, continue their work. They found themselves a Dreadnought. Now comes the fun part, making it orky. Initial investigation, Ork. Technical examination. The examination begins with what Orks call technical methodology, which translates roughly to hitting things with hammers and seeing what happens. Zagdaka, being a mech boy and therefore possessed of slightly more restraint than average Orks, at least looks at things before hitting them, but only slightly before, and the hitting is still inevitable. The Dreadnought is positioned in the center of the workshop on a reinforced platform that groans under its weight. Zagdaka has commandeered every mech boy assistant he can find, and a dozen Gretchen who scurry around fetching tools, moving parts, and generally trying to stay out of stomping range. The lighting is poor, provided by flickering electric lamps that Orks have wired together in ways that should cause electrical fires, but somehow don't. Zagdaka begins his examination with the exterior. The Contemptor chassis is an ancient design, predating the Horus heresy, though this particular example has clearly seen better days. The armor plates are scored, with battle damage, dented and pitted from weapons fire. But underneath the wear, the craftsmanship is still visible. This was made by master artificers, whether Mechanicum tech priests or Alpha Legion warpsmiths, and even degraded by time, it's superior to anything the Orks have encountered recently. "This armor is proper tough," Zagdaka announces to his crew. "We need to check if it's still working right. Zogslag, bring the hammer." A particularly large Ork brings over a hammer that's more club than precision tool. Zagdaka takes it and swings it against the Dreadnought's leg armor, with a resounding clang that echoes through the workshop. The armor doesn't even dent. The Orks approve with appreciative grunts. If it can take a hammer blow from an Ork and not show damage, it's quality stuff. But Zagdaka isn't trying to break it. He's listening to the sound, the way the metal resonates. His genetic memory is processing information he doesn't consciously understand, telling him about the armor's composition, its integrity, where the weak points might be. It's crude science, but it's science nonetheless, filtered through Ork methodology. He moves on to the weapons. The multi-melter on the right arm is a particularly interesting find. It's a sophisticated weapon system designed to melt through heavy armor at short range. Zagdaka understands its basic function instinctively, but has no idea how to actually operate it. That's fine. He'll figure it out through experimentation, which in Ork terms means trying different things until something works or explodes, and both outcomes are acceptable. The power claw on the left arm is simpler to understand. It's for hitting things and tearing them apart. Even Orks can appreciate straightforward weapon design. Zagdaka examines the articulation points, noting the sophisticated servo systems that allow for precise control despite the claw's massive size. He'll want to keep those, but maybe add more spikes to make it look proper. Orky. Then he gets to the interesting part, the access panels. Every Dreadnought has maintenance hatches that allow tech marines to service the internal systems. They're usually secured with complex locks and purity seals, but 2,500 years of neglect have degraded the locks, and Orks don't respect purity seals anyway. Zagdaka's Gretchen assistants are sent scrambling over the Dreadnought's surface, looking for access points and prying them open with crude tools. The first panel they breach reveals cabling and power conduits. Zagdaka leans in close, his orcish features illuminated by the phosphorescent glow of his lamp. He sees wiring done in ways that seem inefficient to him, but that he recognizes as the work of beings who understood electricity at a level beyond his comprehension. That's okay. He doesn't need to understand it fully. He just needs to understand it enough to work with it. "This thing uses a lot of power," he mutters, tracing the conduits with one thick finger. "More Dan. Our stuff. We gonna need a proper generator if we want it running full strength." One of his assistants suggests they just hook it up to the ship's power grid. Zagdaka considers this, calculates the probable power draw in his head through instinct rather than mathematics, and decides it might work if they reroute power from non-essential systems, which for Orks means everything except the weapons and engines. Life support, gravity generators, and navigation can all run on minimal power as far as Orks are concerned. They open more panels, revealing the Dreadnought's interior workings layer by layer. The servo systems that control movement are particularly fascinating to Zagdaka. They're far more sophisticated than anything in Ork technology, using a combination of hydraulics and electrically powered actuators to give the Dreadnought surprising agility for something so massive. He makes mental notes about possibly adapting this design for other Ork vehicles, though his mental notes mostly consist of "remember this for later," followed by immediate distraction by the next interesting thing. Then they find the central sarcophagus. It's a reinforced chamber in the center of the Dreadnought's torso, protected by layers of armor and surrounded by critical systems. Zagdaka's first thought is that it must be the power source or some kind of ammunition storage. It's the right size and position for something important. His assistants start working on opening it, unbolting access panels and prying at seals. "Wait," Zagdaka says, holding up a hand. His genetic memory is sending warning signals that he doesn't fully understand. This isn't just another component. This is something different, something biological. He can sense it in ways he can't articulate, the same way he can sense which way to turn wires to make a circuit work without understanding electron flow. He approaches the sarcophagus more carefully, running his hands over its surface. It's warm, not hot, but warmer than the ambient temperature in the workshop. And there's a faint vibration, so subtle that he only notices it because he's paying attention. Something inside is active, maintaining some kind of function, even though the rest of the Dreadnought appears dormant. "This is important," he announces. "We don't smash this one, not yet. First we figure out what it does." The Gretchen locate what appears to be a diagnostic panel on the side of the sarcophagus. It's covered in high Gothic script that none of the Orks can read, and symbols that mean nothing to them. But there are lights, indicator lamps that are supposed to show system status. Most of them are dark, but a few still glow with faint power. Zagdaka studies these like an ancient priest examining sacred texts. not understanding the specific meanings, but inferring patterns. Red light, probably bad. Orks know red means things that go fast or things that are angry. Either way, important. Green light, probably good. Green is the best color. It's the color of orks. Amber light, probably, whatever. Not good, not bad, just there. By this sophisticated analysis, Zagdaka determines that the sarcophagus is in what orks would call not dead, but not proper awake either condition. He's accidentally more correct than he knows. The stasis field that's been maintaining the Alpha Legion warrior for 2,500 years is still functioning, barely, running on backup power systems that were designed to last for centuries. What Zagdaka doesn't realize is that his examination is affecting those systems. Every time he opens an access panel, he changes the electromagnetic environment around the sarcophagus. Every time his Gretchen disconnect a cable to see where it goes, they introduce fluctuations in the power supply. These aren't enough to wake the pilot immediately, but they're degrading the stasis field's integrity. Inside the sarcophagus, the warrior's consciousness stirs, not fully awake, but becoming less deeply asleep. Dreams become more vivid, more coherent. Memories surface with greater clarity. The sense of something being wrong grows stronger, though they still can't identify what or why. Zagdaka continues his examination, completely unaware that he's slowly bringing a 2,500-year-old Alpha Legion operative back to consciousness. He's excited about this find. It's the best piece of technology he's gotten his hands on in years. The war boss will be pleased. Other mech boys will be envious. And once he figures out how to make it work, they'll have a proper war machine to unleash on their enemies. He starts planning modifications. The multi-melter is good, but could it be bigger? The power claw is impressive, but could it have more blades? The armor is strong, but does it have enough spikes? These are the questions that occupy an orc mech boy's mind when presented with new technology to improve. His crew brings over diagnostic equipment, which for orcs consists of things like stick what makes sparks, on wire and see what happens, and pour oil on moving parts until they stop making bad noises. They begin testing systems, activating dormant circuits, seeing which components still function after millennia of neglect. The Dreadnought's power cells are depleted but not dead. With fresh power input, some systems begin coming online. Indicator lights that have been dark for 2,500 years flicker to life. Servo motors that have been locked in place begin responding to input signals. The machine spirit, that quasi-conscious entity that inhabits all Imperial machines, starts to wake. And in the sarcophagus, the warrior begins to wake with it. The first sensation is pain. Not the sharp pain of injury, but the deep, pervasive pain of body parts that have been motionless for too long, trying to remember how to move. Neural pathways that have been dormant fire erratically. The amniotic fluid that sustained them begins circulating more actively, and with it comes restored sensation. They can feel the sarcophagus around them, can feel the neural interfaces penetrating their spine, can feel their ruined body floating in fluid that's become slightly acidic over the centuries, irritating what's left of their skin. These are all normal sensations for a Dreadnought pilot, uncomfortable but familiar. What's not familiar are the voices. They're hearing something through the Dreadnought's external audio pickups, which shouldn't be active during stasis. Voices speaking a language they don't immediately recognize, though something in their enhanced space marine neural architecture begins parsing it automatically. Orcish. They're hearing Orcish. Confusion battles with ingrained training. Why would there be orcs? Where are they? What's the last thing they remember? The battle. They remember the battle. Chaos forces and Imperial forces clashing on a world whose name they're not sure they ever knew. They were damaged, critically damaged, then the surgery, then stasis. But that should have been temporary. They should have been awakened by their brothers, by Legion Tech Marines who understood their systems, who knew the proper procedures. Something is very, very wrong. They try to access their systems, to activate visual feeds, to get a sense of their surroundings. But their neural interface feels sluggish, unresponsive. It's like trying to move limbs through thick mud. The systems aren't fully online, and even those that are active aren't responding properly to their inputs. Outside, Zagdaka notices something odd. The Dreadnought's visual sensors, the optical pickups that serve as its eyes, just flickered. He didn't do anything that should have activated them. They should still be in standby mode. But for just a second, he swears he saw them glow with a faint light before going dark again. "Did any of you gits mess with the eye bits?" he demands of his crew. The Gretchen all shake their heads emphatically. Messing with something without being told to is a good way to get stomped. And Gretchen are very good at not getting stomped through careful lying and genuine innocence in equal measure. In this case, they're genuinely innocent. They didn't touch the visual sensors. Zagdaka approaches the Dreadnought's head assembly, peering up at the optical sensors. They're dark now, no sign of activity. He's about to dismiss it as a power fluctuation, a random surge through degraded systems, when they flicker again. Just for a fraction of a second, but long enough for him to see it clearly. Something inside this machine is waking up. His mech boy instincts, the genetic knowledge hardwired into his DNA, are telling him this is significant. This isn't just a machine. There's something else here. Something alive. He doesn't understand what a dreadnought really is, doesn't comprehend that there's a space marine warrior entombed within, but he knows that this is more than simple machinery. "Boss," he calls out to Skargul, who's been watching the proceedings with diminishing interest. "I think there's something alive in this thing. We need to be careful like." Skargul stomps over, his heavy tread making the workshop's metal floor ring. "What do you mean alive? Like a squig what got inside?" "Nah, not like that. I think this whole thing is made to carry something alive, like how we put grots into killer cans. Sept proper sophisticated." This catches Skargul's attention. Killer cans are Ork war machines where Gretchen are stuffed into small armored walkers, wired into the controls and sent into battle. It's crude, brutal, and the Gretchen usually don't survive long, but it's effective. The idea that humans or space marines might have a more advanced version of the same concept is intriguing. "So there's an human in there. A space marine maybe?" "Maybe. And if there is, they's waking up." Skargul grins, showing his massive tusks. "Well then, let's wake 'em up proper. Give 'em a nice orky welcome." Zagdaka wants to protest that they should be more careful, that they don't understand the systems yet, that waking up whatever's inside before they've secured it could be dangerous. But he's also an orc, and orcs don't do caution very well. Besides, Skargul is bigger than him, which in orc society means Skargul makes the decisions. The mech boy crew begins actively trying to wake the dreadnought. They route more power to the sarcophagus systems. They start activating neural interface connections. They bypass safety protocols they don't understand in pursuit of functionality they only barely comprehend. It's like watching children try to start a car by pushing random buttons, except these particular children are genetically programmed with an instinctive understanding of machinery and backed by a reality-warping psychic field. Somehow, it works. Inside the sarcophagus, the Alpha Legion warrior feels the awakening accelerate beyond their control. Systems that should activate gradually, allowing them time to adjust, are coming online in random order. The neural interface connects fully before their sensory systems are ready, flooding their brain with data it's not prepared to process. The amniotic fluid begins cycling at a rate that makes breathing difficult. It's like being thrown into ice-cold water while drugged and disoriented. Every sensation is wrong. Every signal is confused. Their training demands they maintain control, stay calm, assess the situation. But their training was never designed for this scenario. No Alpha Legion operative has protocols for waking up in an Ork workshop, being crudely reactivated by Xenos who don't know what they're doing. The warrior tries to scream, but they have no lungs to scream with, no throat to give voice to their terror. The scream translates through their neural interface to the Dreadnought systems, and what comes out is a burst of static from the external speakers, a harsh crackling that fills the workshop. The Orks jump back, startled. Then they start laughing, of course they do. Orks think danger is funny. The louder the noise, the better the laugh. Several of them are slapping their knees and howling with delight that the machine made a scary noise. Zagdaka, meanwhile, is frantically checking his diagnostic equipment such as it is, trying to understand what just happened. The power draw spiked, multiple systems activated simultaneously, and those weird readings from the central sarcophagus just went from mostly dormant to extremely active. Whatever's in there is definitely waking up, and from the looks of these readings, it's not happy about it. Inside the sarcophagus, the Alpha Legion warrior is drowning in sensory input they can't control. They can hear the Orks laughing, can feel their Dreadnought chassis being touched, modified, violated by crude hands, can sense through the various sensors that they're in an environment that absolutely should not contain Orks. And slowly, gradually, through the confusion and the terror and the disorientation, one thought emerges with absolute clarity. They need to regain control. Now, the horror of Orkish improvements. What happens next is every tech priest's nightmare, every Space Marine's horror, and every Alpha Legion operative's complete failure of mission security. The Orks decide to improve their new toy. For the next several weeks, the Dreadnought becomes the central focus of the Mechboy workshop. Zagdaka assembles a full crew of assistants, brings in more specialized mechboys to help with specific systems, and begins the process of making this ancient war machine proper Orky. The first thing they do is paint it. This might seem superficial, but for Orks, paint is practically a religious sacrament. Colors have meaning, confer benefits, and change how the painted object functions. At least they do when Orks believe they do, and the WAG field makes that belief reality. The discussion about what color to paint the Dreadnought takes hours and nearly descends into violence several times. Red faction. Paint it red. Red ones go faster. We make this thing run around real quick like stomping stuff. Yellow faction. Nah, yellow. Yellow's more explodey. We want the guns to be dead killy. Blue faction. You're all stupid. Blue is lucky. We paint it blue. It don't get hurt in fights. Green faction. Green is best. Green is the color of Orks. Everything should be green. Black faction. Black is ard. Dead ard. We want it tough. The argument goes on until Zagdaka, using his authority as head mechboy, makes a decision that satisfies no one, and therefore perfectly represents Ork democratic process. They'll paint it multiple colors. Red for speed, yellow for explosive weapons, some blue because lucky is good, and liberal amounts of green because green is always appropriate. The result is a garish, eye-watering color scheme that no Space Marine chapter would ever use, but that Orks find absolutely beautiful. The painting process itself is traumatic for the warrior inside. They can feel through their Dreadnought sensors as crude brushes slap paint onto their armor. They can smell the chemical stink of Ork paint through their environmental sensors. Each brushstroke feels like a violation, a desecration of their chapter's colors and heraldry. The Hydra symbol of the Alpha Legion, worn with pride for millennia, is being covered over with garish Ork colors. But the painting is just the beginning. Zagdaka has bigger plans. First, he decides the weapons need upgrading. The multi-melter is impressive, but it could be more impressive. Using a combination of scavenged parts from Ork weapons and some creative welding, he adds what he calls a bigger Bernie bit to the melter. This consists of extra fuel tanks strapped to the weapon's housing, a secondary ignition chamber that definitely wasn't in the original design, and a crude but effective modification to the beam focusing array. Does it make the weapon more powerful? Probably not in any measurable way. Does it make it more dangerous to the user? Almost certainly yes. But does it look more impressive and make bigger flames when it fires? Absolutely. And for Orks, That's what matters. The warrior inside can feel their weapon system being modified, can sense new weight distribution, new power connections. Their targeting systems, designed for precision, are now connected to equipment they don't recognize and can't trust. The power claw receives similar treatment. Zagdaka adds extra blades to it, serrated edges that have no practical purpose but look intimidating. He reinforces the crushing surfaces with metal plates from other sources, creating a patchwork appearance that makes the claw look more brutal if less elegant. He also adds a crude flamer to the wrist assembly, a weapon the original design never included, which means the fuel lines are routed in ways that make the fire suppression systems scream warnings the warrior inside can't communicate to anyone. Then comes the armor modification. The Contemptor chassis already has formidable armor, but Orks believe you can never have too much armor. They begin welding additional plates onto the exterior, scavenged from destroyed vehicles and enemy equipment. These plates don't follow the Dreadnought's original design aesthetics. They're welded on at odd angles, secured with bolts that probably weren't designed for armor mounting, and in some cases actually create weak points by covering up the original armor's ablative layers. The warrior inside can feel their mobility changing as weight distribution shifts. Their carefully calibrated movement systems are now off balance. What was once a precisely tuned war machine is becoming a lumbering patchwork beast. They try to adjust, to compensate, but their neural interface keeps receiving conflicting data as Orks disconnect sensors to run new wiring and then reconnect them in slightly wrong locations. One of the most disturbing modifications is the addition of better bits for seeing. Zagdaka decides the Dreadnought's optical sensors are too boring, too simple. He adds additional sensor arrays scavenged from Ork vehicles, creating a cluster of lenses and scanners around the head assembly that look more like a technological spider's eye cluster than a proper Dreadnought sensor suite. These new sensors don't integrate properly with the targeting systems, sending garbage data that the warrior has to learn to filter out. The most invasive modification comes when Zagdaka decides the Dreadnought needs better power systems. The original power cells are ancient and depleted. While they could be recharged with proper equipment and care, Orks don't have that equipment and wouldn't use care if they did. Instead, Zagdaka installs an Ork power generator, a crude fusion reactor that works on principles that should violate thermodynamics, but doesn't, because enough Orks believe it shouldn't. This means opening the Dreadnought's power core, the most sensitive part of the chassis outside the sarcophagus itself, and connecting alien technology directly to systems that were designed by the finest artificers of the Mechanicum. It should cause catastrophic failures. The power output should be incompatible. The connections should short out immediately. But it works. Because Zagdaka believes it will work, and he's surrounded by enough Orks that the Warg field smooths over the impossibilities. The power generator comes online, feeding energy into the Dreadnought's systems in ways they were never designed to handle, and somehow the ancient machine adapts. The warrior inside can feel their power supply become erratic, surging and dropping in ways that make them feel constantly on the edge of losing consciousness. But it works. Throughout all of this, the warrior is trying desperately to communicate. They're an Alpha Legion operative. They're trained in infiltration, in manipulation, in turning enemies against each other. Surely they can find some way to make these Orks understand that they're a prisoner, that they need to escape, that this is a catastrophic security breach. But they have no way to communicate. The Dreadnought's speakers could theoretically work, but the Orks have disconnected them half the time for various improvements. And even when they're connected, the warrior's attempts to form words come out as mechanical static. The Orks just think it's the machine making cool noises and laugh appreciatively. They try using the weapon systems to signal, to make it clear there's a conscious being inside controlling the Dreadnought. But the weapons are in pieces half the time as Orks modify them. And when they do manage to move something, the Orks just get excited that the machine is getting fightier and do more modifications. It's psychological torture of a uniquely Orkish variety, not deliberate cruelty. The Orks aren't trying to torment anyone. They genuinely think they're improving a cool machine. But their innocent enthusiasm is destroying everything the warrior knows. Their identity as Alpha Legion is being literally painted over. Their carefully maintained war machine is being turned into a crude mockery, and they're powerless to stop it. The warrior begins to understand what it truly means to be helpless. They're an Alpha Legion operative. They're supposed to always have a plan, always have a contingency, always be in control, even when it appears they're not. But there's no contingency plan for this. There's no hidden strategy that will save them. They're trapped in a metal shell, being modified by beings who don't even realize they're there, unable to affect their own fate in any meaningful way. Weeks pass. The modifications continue. The Dreadnought is slowly transformed from an ancient relic of the Alpha Legion into what Orks proudly call a proper Orky dread boss. It's covered in spikes, painted in garish colors, equipped with weapons that operate on principles the Mechanicum would reject as impossible. It looks like it was assembled from scrap in a junkyard, which from a certain perspective it was. During all this time, the warrior inside has brief moments of clarity between longer periods of disorientation. The neural interface works intermittently as Orks disconnect and reconnect systems. Their sensory inputs are unreliable. Their body, already reduced to a sack of organs floating in fluid, exists in a state of constant low-level pain as degraded systems struggle to keep them alive. But they're Alpha Legion. They don't give up. They can't give up, so they endure. They catalogue everything they experience, filing it away in memory systems they hope still work. They try to understand Orkish speech, learning the crude language through constant exposure. They attempt to map the environment around them through fleeting sensor readings. They prepare, because that's what Alpha Legion does. They prepare for an opportunity that might never come. And in the depths of their fractured consciousness, one thought keeps recurring. If they ever get free of this nightmare, someone is going to pay. The Alpha Legion has a very long memory, and they've just added an entire Ork warband to the list of grudges to be settled. Even if it takes another 1,000 years, even if they have to manipulate events across whole sectors, somehow, someday, these Orks will regret what they've done. But first, they have to survive. And survival, they're discovering, might be worse than death would have been. Because death would have been an ending. This is eternal violation, an ongoing desecration with no end in sight. This is the nightmare scenario that no Alpha Legion operative ever trained for, because no one ever imagined it could happen. And the worst part, the modifications are working. Against all reason, against everything they know about technology and engineering, the Orkish improvements are functional. Their weapons are more dangerous, if less reliable. Their armor is stronger, if poorly designed. Their power systems are more robust, if wildly unpredictable. The Orks have turned them into something that shouldn't exist, but does anyway. They're no longer quite an Alpha Legion Dreadnought. They're not quite an Ork war machine. They're something in between, a hybrid that represents the complete destruction of everything they were, rebuilt into something they never wanted to be. And there's absolutely nothing they can do about it except endure and wait and hope that somehow, eventually, an opportunity for escape or vengeance will present itself. The Alpha Legion warrior has fought Chaos Space Marines and survived, has infiltrated enemy strongholds and escaped, has endured battles that would break lesser warriors. But this might be what finally breaks them. Not the violence, not the pain, but the sheer, crushing indignity of being turned into an Ork's favorite toy. Full consciousness returns, the awakening. The moment of full consciousness comes during a weapons test. Zagdaka has finally finished his modifications, or at least reached a point where he's satisfied enough to see if the thing actually works. The Dreadnought has been connected to a portable power generator. All systems have been checked and rechecked using Ork methodology, which means hit it with a wrench until the bad noises stop. And now it's time to bring it fully online. The warrior inside has been semi-aware for weeks, drifting in and out of consciousness as the Orks worked. But they haven't had full access to their systems, haven't been able to fully integrate with the Dreadnought's machine spirit. The neural interface has been intermittent, like trying to use a computer with a loose connection. Frustrating, painful, but not complete. Now, as Zagdaka throws the final switches and the Ork power generator floods the chassis with energy, everything comes online at once. It's overwhelming. Sensory input from dozens of sensors slams into their consciousness. Visual feeds from the optical arrays, now multiplied by the Ork additions. Audio pickups capturing the sounds of the workshop. Pressure sensors across every centimeter of armor plating. Power flow indicators showing the new generator's erratic but powerful output. Targeting systems connecting to weapons that have been modified beyond recognition. Environmental sensors detecting Ork body heat, Ork machinery, Ork everything. The warrior's mind, which has been operating in a fog for weeks, suddenly clears. Full consciousness returns like a shock of cold water, and with it comes full understanding of their situation. They're not in an Alpha Legion facility. They're not being reactivated by their brothers. They're in an Ork workshop, surrounded by Xenos, having been modified and desecrated over the course of weeks. The rage that floods through them is primal, transcending their space marine conditioning. They are Alpha Legion, trained to remain calm under any circumstances, to calculate and scheme even in the face of overwhelming odds. But this is beyond training. This is violation on a fundamental level. Their war machine, their sacred trust, has been turned into a grotesque parody by creatures they've spent their entire existence considering beneath contempt. They try to move, to lash out, to destroy everything in reach. But the motor control systems don't respond properly. The modifications the Orks have made have changed everything. What used to be intuitive movements now require conscious effort and calculation. The power claw on their left arm twitches spasmodically as they try to clench it. The multi-melter swivels, but not to where they're trying to aim it. Zagdaka notices the movement immediately. It's working. The dead boss is moving. Everyone stand back. Let's see what it does. The Orks retreat to what they consider a safe distance, which isn't very far, because Orks don't have a well-developed sense of self-preservation. They're excited, eager to see their creation come to life. Several are already making bets about whether it'll try to shoot them first or stomp them. The warrior inside is fighting for control. Their neural interface is connected. They can feel the Dreadnought responding to their thoughts, but it's like trying to write with their offhand while wearing thick gloves. The muscle memory is wrong. The weight distribution is different. Systems that should respond instantly lag or overcompensate. They manage to take a step. The Dreadnought lurches forward with a grinding of servos that sounds wrong to their trained ear. The gyroscopic stabilizers compensate, but too slowly, nearly sending them off balance. They course correct, but overcorrect, stumbling the other direction. To the watching Orks, it looks like the machine is learning to walk. To the warrior inside, it's humiliating. Look at it go! Skargul, the knob, is delighted. It's stomping around like a proper Ork. Zaggy, you done good. Zagdaka is monitoring his diagnostic equipment, such as it is. Power readings are higher than he expected. The servo systems are drawing more energy than they should. And there's something odd about the pattern of movement. It's not random. It's trying to do something specific, he just doesn't know what. The warrior finally manages to stabilize their movement. It took more concentration than it should have, but they're standing upright, balanced, ready to fight. Except they don't know how to fight with these modified systems. The targeting reticle in their visual field is showing multiple crosshairs, some from the original systems and some from Ork additions, and they don't line up. The weapons feel wrong, unbalanced, their weight distribution altered by the modifications. But they're Alpha Legion. Adaptability is literally part of their gene seed. They can learn. They will learn. And once they've mastered these bastardized systems, they'll use them to escape this nightmare. They try to speak. The Dreadnought's vocalizer should allow them to communicate, to identify themselves, to demand information. But when they attempt to form words, what comes out of the speakers is a distorted mechanical voice that sounds more like grinding metal than human speech. The Orks have modified the vocalizer assembly, adding their own amplification systems, and now it translates their attempts at speech into incomprehensible noise. DA Alpha, Legion, demands. The voice is massive, echoing through the workshop, each word a struggle to articulate through systems that aren't responding properly. The Orks freeze. Then they start cheering. The machine can talk. Even better, it's saying things that sound angry and impressive. They don't understand the words. Most Orks don't speak Gothic, and even if they did, the vocalizer is distorting everything. But the tone is perfect. Aggressive, threatening, exactly what a proper war machine should sound like. "It's talking!" one of the boys shouts. "The dead boss is a talker. That's proper amazing, that is." The warrior inside wants to scream in frustration. They're trying to communicate, to establish any kind of dialogue, and the Orks are treating it like entertainment. But they force themselves to stay calm. They're trapped in a situation they don't understand, in a body that no longer feels like their own, surrounded by enemies they can't immediately fight. This calls for information gathering, not blind rage. They try to take in their surroundings through their visual senses. The workshop is chaotic, filled with Ork machinery and weapons in various states of assembly. They can see a dozen Orks watching them, and beyond them, what looks like the interior of a ship's hold. They're on a vessel then, moving through space. How long have they been unconscious? Where are they going? Zagdaka approaches cautiously, carrying what looks like a diagnostic tool but is actually just a wrench with wires taped to it. "Right, let's test the weapons. Can you hear me, dead boss? If you can, make the shooty arm go up and down." The warrior considers their options. They could refuse to cooperate, but that would just make the Orks angry, and angry Orks might do more modifications or simply scrap them for parts. Better to cooperate for now. Learn as much as possible. Wait for an opportunity. They move the multi-melter arm up and down, the servos grinding in protest. The movement is jerky, imprecise, but it works. Zagdaka makes approving noises and marks something on a piece of scrap metal he's using as a checklist. "Good, now do the stabby arm." They move the power claw, clenching and unclenching it. Each movement is a conscious effort, but they're starting to get a feel for the modified systems. The neural interface is adapting, their space marine nervous system compensating for the changes. It's not perfect, probably never will be perfect, but it's becoming functional. Over the next hour, Zagdaka puts them through a series of tests. Walk forward, walk backward, turn left, turn right, reach out with the power claw, fire the flamer the Orks added to their wrist. All of it is humiliating, being controlled like a puppet, but they endure. Each test gives them more information about their modified systems. Each movement helps their neural interface adapt. And all the while, they're gathering intelligence, listening to the Orks talk, learning their crude language, observing the layout of the workshop, cataloging potential weapons and escape routes, analyzing the ship's structure from what they can see and hear. They're trapped, violated, and suffering, but they're still Alpha Legion, still operational, still dangerous. Zagdaka eventually pronounces the test successful. "Da dead boss works. The war boss is gonna be real pleased. We can use this in the next fight." The next fight. They're going to be used in combat. Against whom? For what purpose? The warrior has so many questions and no way to get answers. But they know one thing with absolute certainty. When that fight comes, they'll be ready. They'll find a way to turn this situation to their advantage. Because that's what Alpha Legion does. For now, they allow themselves to be powered down, the Ork generator disconnecting as they're placed back on standby. But this time, standby isn't the half-aware stasis they've endured for 2,500 years. This time, they remain conscious, alert, planning. They're damaged, degraded, and decorated in Ork colors. But they're awake, they're aware, and they're extremely dangerous. The Orks have inadvertently created something terrifying. A fully conscious, fully trained Alpha Legion operative, with 2,500 years of strategic intelligence locked in their mind, operating a war machine they're rapidly learning to control. They think they've made a weapon they can use. They don't realize they've awakened something that will eventually find a way to destroy them, no matter how long it takes. In the darkness of standby mode, the warrior begins planning. They have time, they have patience, they have millennia of training in infiltration, manipulation, and long-term strategy. The Orks have given them a new body, however crude. They've given them weapons, however modified. And they've given them access to an Ork warband from the inside. The warrior can't help but imagine what Alfarius would say about this situation. Probably something about turning disadvantage into advantage, about using the enemy's own strength against them. It's almost funny, in a dark way. The Orks think they've captured a weapon. What they've actually done is let an Alpha Legion operative into their midst. They just don't know it yet. The psychological nightmare intensifies. Being awake changes everything. When the warrior was in stasis, they could retreat into semi-consciousness, could let time pass without fully experiencing it. But now they're aware for every moment, and every moment is torture in its own unique way. They exist in a state of constant sensory assault, forced to process information through systems that have been modified beyond recognition. The first issue is the pain. Before the Ork modifications, the Dreadnought systems were designed to minimize the pilot's suffering. Medical sensors would monitor their biological components, adjusting amniotic fluid composition, administering pain suppressors when needed, maintaining homeostasis. The Orks have disconnected or damaged many of these systems. The warrior now exists in a state of low-level constant pain, their ruined body protesting its imprisonment in ways the medical systems can no longer fully address. Their nerve endings, the few that remain, fire erratically. Their organs, kept alive through technology they no longer fully control, ache in ways they can't articulate. The neural interfaces that connect their consciousness to the Dreadnought create phantom sensations, ghost pains in limbs they lost millennia ago. It's bearable, but only barely, and only because Space Marine physiology includes pain editors that allow them to function despite injuries that would incapacitate normal humans. The second issue is the sensory confusion. The Ork added sensors feed them data their brain doesn't know how to process. Visual input comes from a dozen sources, creating a fragmented, multiple perspective view of their surroundings that makes it hard to focus on anything specific. Audio comes through so many pickups that they're constantly hearing overlapping sound, unable to filter out the noise. The new sensors don't integrate cleanly with the old ones, creating conflicts and contradictions in their sensory input. It's like having multiple sets of eyes and ears that don't quite line up, seeing and hearing the same thing from slightly different angles and wavelengths, with their brain forced to somehow make sense of the contradictory information. Over time, they might adapt, might learn to process these inputs correctly, but that adaptation process is its own special hell. The third issue is the isolation. They're surrounded by Orks, can hear them constantly, can see them through their visual sensors, but they can't communicate. Every attempt to speak comes out as distorted mechanical noise. They've tried using their weapon systems to signal, but the Orks interpret any movement as either malfunction or the machine getting feisty, which they find amusing rather than concerning. They're trapped in what's essentially a prison of their own body, able to observe but not interact, to see but not be seen, to exist but not truly participate. It's a special kind of solitary confinement, made worse by the constant presence of beings who don't even realize they're there. The fourth issue is the degradation of their memories. The warrior's organic brain is centuries old, kept alive through technology but not truly preserved. Memory degradation is normal for Dreadnought pilots. Slow erosion of identity that eventually reduces even the greatest heroes to confused, aggressive husks. But the Ork modifications have accelerated this process. The power fluctuations stress their biological systems. The modified neural interface creates feedback loops that cause neural pathway degradation. They can feel their memories becoming less reliable, events blurring together, important details slipping away. They're forgetting things they shouldn't forget. Faces of battle brothers from before the heresy, the exact details of operations they led, code phrases they're supposed to remember. Some of this is natural degradation after 2,500 years. Some of it is stress from the current situation. But it's happening, and they're aware it's happening, which makes it even more terrifying. The strategic intelligence they carry, the secrets that made them valuable enough to preserve as a dreadnought, are slowly leaking away like water through cracked fingers. They try desperately to hold on to the important information, rehearsing it mentally, but even that is becoming difficult. The neural interface keeps interrupting their thoughts with sensor data. The pain keeps breaking their concentration. The confusion keeps making them lose track of what they were trying to remember. The fifth issue is the identity crisis. They were an Alpha Legion warrior. Everything about their existence was defined by that identity. The secrecy, the deception, the careful manipulation of events toward desired outcomes. Their armor bore the Hydra symbol. Their tactics embodied the Legion's philosophy. Even entombed in a dreadnought, they remained Alpha Legion. But now they're painted in Ork colors. Their weapons are Ork modifications. Their systems run on Ork technology. When they move, they sound like an Ork machine. When they fight, and they will be forced to fight, they'll be fighting for Orks, using Ork weapons, in service of Ork goals. They're becoming what they're pretending to be, and they're losing the ability to distinguish between the mask and the face. It's psychological warfare of the most insidious kind, not because anyone is trying to break them, but because the circumstances themselves are corrosive to their sense of self. They're an Alpha Legion operative who can no longer operate, a master of deception who's trapped in an identity they can't control, a warrior whose body has been taken from them and remade in the image of the enemy. The worst part is the time. Time stretches endlessly when you're conscious but inactive. The Orks don't keep them powered on constantly. Often they're in standby mode, systems reduced to minimal function, unable to move but still aware. Hours pass. Days pass. Weeks pass. They have nothing to do but think, and thinking leads to rumination, and rumination leads to despair. They think about their chapter, their legion, whatever you want to call the Alpha Legion. Do their brothers know they're missing? Are they searching? Or has so much time passed that everyone who knew them is dead, and they're just one more loss among thousands? A name in a casualty report from 2,500 years ago that no one remembers. They think about the missions they never completed, the strategic plans that depended on their survival, the intelligence they were carrying that might have been crucial to operations that have long since failed or succeeded without them. Were they important, or were they just one more operative among thousands, their loss absorbed into the larger strategy without missing a beat? They think about what will happen to them. The Orks are taking them somewhere, presumably to fight in some battle or invasion. When that happens, they'll be used as a weapon against whoever the Orks are fighting. If it's Imperials, they'll be killing humans. If it's Space Marines, they'll be killing their cousins. Even if it's other Xenos or Chaos forces, they'll be doing it in service of Orks, which is a betrayal of everything they believe in. And they think about escape, endlessly calculating possibilities and probabilities. Could they overpower the Orks during combat? Could they fake a malfunction and be left behind during an assault? Could they somehow communicate with whoever the Orks are fighting, warn them, turn this situation to their advantage? Every scenario has problems. Every plan has gaps. But they keep planning anyway, because it's all they can do. The psychological deterioration isn't instantaneous. It's gradual, a slow wearing away of their mental fortitude. They find themselves having conversations with people who aren't there, battle brothers from centuries ago who died long before they were entombed. They catch themselves responding to sensor ghosts, phantom movements in their peripheral vision that aren't real. They start to lose track of time, unsure if they've been awake for hours or days. The Space Marine conditioning helps. They've been trained to endure psychological warfare, to resist interrogation, to maintain their sanity under impossible stress. But that training was designed for finite periods of suffering, days, weeks, maybe months. Not this endless grinding existence where every moment is wrong and there's no foreseeable end. They start to understand why Chaos Dreadnoughts go mad. It's not just the corruption, though that's certainly part of it. It's the sheer weight of existence without purpose, the accumulation of centuries of suffering without relief or meaning. At least loyalist dreadnoughts are revered, consulted, treated as honored ancestors. Chaos. Dreadnoughts are treated as weapons and punishments, much like they're being treated now. Is this what they've become? A weapon to be used and discarded? A thing rather than a person? The Orks certainly see them that way. They talk about the dead boss, like it's a particularly sophisticated tool, not a living being. They make modifications without asking, without considering that someone inside might object. They're not being cruel. They genuinely don't understand that there's a person inside who can think and feel and suffer. And the worst realization of all, even if they escape, even if they somehow get away from the Orks and make it back to the Alpha Legion, will anyone care? They've been gone for 2,500 years. They're millennia out of date, carrying intelligence that's probably useless, operating a war machine that's been corrupted by Xenos technology. They might be seen as tainted, compromised, more liability than asset. The Alpha Legion is notoriously practical about such things. They've sacrificed operations and operatives before in pursuit of larger goals. A single dreadnought, damaged and out of date, might not be worth the effort to recover. They might be deemed expendable, left to their fate as an acceptable loss in the grand strategy. That thought, more than any physical pain or sensory confusion, is what threatens to break them. The possibility that their suffering is meaningless, that no one is coming to save them, that they're truly and completely alone. It's the nightmare every Space Marine fears, dying alone, unmourned, forgotten. But they're still Alpha Legion. Even in the depths of despair, even with their identity crumbling and their memories fading, they hold on to one fundamental truth. They don't give up. Ever. The Alpha Legion doesn't accept defeat. They turn disadvantage into advantage. They make plans within plans. They endure. So they endure this. They catalogue the pain, the confusion, the isolation, filing it all away for later use. Because someday, somehow, they'll find a way to turn this experience into a weapon. They'll use what they've learned to destroy the Orks who did this to them. They'll apply the lessons of their suffering to future operations, making themselves better, stronger, more dangerous. And if that day never comes, if they die in Ork colors fighting Ork battles, then at least they'll die as what they were, an Alpha Legion operative who never stopped fighting, never stopped planning, never stopped being dangerous even in the darkest of circumstances. It's not much. It's not comfort. But it's enough to keep them sane, at least for now. And in the grim darkness of their metallic prison, sanity is sometimes the best you can hope for. Deployment. The first battle. The call to battle comes suddenly, as it usually does for Orks. The Wah drops out of warp space near an Imperial world that's been weakened by previous conflicts. The Orks don't know its strategic importance or its garrison strength. They just know it looks like a good fight, which is all the justification they need. Ships full of eager Orks prepare for the assault, and among the weapons being loaded into drop pods and landing craft is the modified Dreadnought. The warrior inside feels the change in activity. The ship's vibrations change as engines throttle up. Ork voices become more excited, more numerous. Systems around them are activated as the workshop becomes a pre-battle staging area. They're being moved, carried by Orks who grunt under their weight, loaded onto a landing craft designed for heavy equipment. They should be terrified. They're about to be deployed into combat under circumstances completely outside their control, operating systems they barely understand in service of the enemy. But instead, they feel something they haven't felt in weeks: anticipation. Battle, at least, is familiar. Battle is something they understand. And in battle, opportunities arise for those skilled enough to seize them. The landing craft is a typical Ork design, which means it's barely controlled chaos held together with welds and faith in Mork and Gork. They're strapped down alongside other Ork war machines, a pair of killer cans with Gretchen gibbering inside, several death dreads that are essentially Ork-sized dreadnoughts filled with homicidal Orks instead of space marines, and what looks like a looted Imperial Chimera transport that's been so heavily modified it's barely recognizable. Zagdaka is there, performing last-minute checks with his usual combination of technical knowledge and enthusiastic hammer application. "Right, dead boss. You're gonna do proper good in this fight. Just stomp around, shoot their enemy, smash stuff, orky things." The warrior inside doesn't respond, can't respond in any way the mech boy would understand. But they're listening, gathering information. The enemy is Dayumis, which means Imperial Guard most likely. The objective is smash their base and loot all the good stuff. The tactical depth of Ork warfare is not impressive, but at least they know what they're being deployed against. The landing craft's engines roar to life with a sound that suggests they're about one mechanical failure away from catastrophic explosion. The warrior feels the vessel lurch into motion, pulling away from the mothership and beginning its descent to the planet's surface. The ride is violent. Orks don't believe in smooth flying. They believe in getting there fast and hitting hard. And if that means everyone inside gets tossed around like dice in a cup, well, that just makes it more exciting. Through their audio pickups, they can hear the Orks aboard the craft yelling war cries, singing crude songs about violence, and making bets about who'll kill the most enemies. It's chaos, but purposeful chaos. For all their apparent disorder, Orks are extremely effective at what they do. And what they do is warfare on a massive, brutal scale. The descent becomes rougher as they hit atmosphere. The craft shudders and shakes. Something explodes outside, probably anti-air fire from Imperial defenses. The Orks cheer because getting shot at means they're close to the fight. The warrior inside braces their systems, preparing for the impact they know is coming. When it comes, it's brutal. The landing craft doesn't so much land as crash with controlled fury, slamming into the ground hard enough that anyone not secured would be turned into paste. The warrior's internal gyroscopes scream warnings. Their stabilizers compensate frantically. But the Ork modifications hold, which is both surprising and testament to the weird effectiveness of Ork engineering. The ramp drops before the craft has fully settled, and Orks pour out screaming, charging toward whatever enemy they've landed near. The killer cans scuttle forward on spindly legs. The death dreads lumber out, already firing their guns at targets the warrior inside can't see yet. And then it's their turn. Hands release the chains holding them. The loading ramp slopes down before them, and Zagdaka's voice comes through their audio pickups. "Go on, dead boss. Show 'em what you can do. Wag!" For a moment, they hesitate. This is the point of no return. If they walk down that ramp, if they engage in combat for the Orks, they become a traitor to the Imperium in the most literal sense. They'll be fighting against humans, possibly killing Imperial soldiers who are just trying to defend their world from Xenos invasion. Every principle they've upheld for millennia screams against it. But they have no choice. The Orks will notice if they refuse to move. And standing still in a landing craft while a battle rages outside isn't going to provide any opportunities for escape. They need to engage, need to be in the fight, because only then will they have any chance to affect the outcome. They move forward, servos grinding, taking their first steps onto an alien battlefield in 2,500 years. The sensory input floods in as their systems activate fully. Visual feeds showing a chaotic battlefield, Ork warriors charging across open ground toward Imperial defensive positions. Imperial guardsmen firing laser guns from trenches and bunkers. Explosions everywhere as Ork artillery trades fire with Imperial heavy weapons. And there in the middle of it, a walking war machine painted in garish Ork colors, equipped with weapons they barely know how to use, surrounded by Xenos who think they're an ally. The situation would be almost funny if it weren't so horrific. Their tactical training asserts itself automatically. They assess the battlefield, identify threats and opportunities, calculate firing solutions. An Imperial bunker, 200 meters ahead. Heavy bolter emplacement. Imperial guardsmen in trenches to the left, laser guns and flamers. A Lehman Russ battle tank on the right, turret traversing to engage Ork vehicles. Their modified weapons systems lock onto targets without conscious direction. The targeting reticle appears in their visual feed, although now it's multiple reticles from different systems, confusing and contradictory. They try to designate the bunker as a target, but the system interprets their neural commands differently than they expect. The multi-melter fires, but not at the bunker. The beam goes wide, catching a group of Ork boys who were advancing in roughly that direction. The superheated beam vaporizes two of them instantly and severely wounds a third. The remaining Orks in the group barely notice, too focused on charging the enemy to care that their own war machine just killed some of them. The warrior inside wants to scream in frustration. They try to target the Imperial position, try to at least make their forced service mean something, but the modified systems betrayed them. They've just killed Orks, which should be a victory, except it was an accident and it doesn't change their situation at all. They try again, this time focusing harder on the neural interface, really concentrating on what they want to happen. They designate the Lehman Russ tank as a target. The tank is a threat to everyone on this battlefield, Ork and Alpha Legion alike. Taking it out is justifiable, regardless of who they're technically fighting for. The multi-melter fires again, and this time the aim is better. The beam catches the tank's side armor, melting through the relatively thin plating and detonating something inside. The tank's turret lifts off its mounting in a spectacular explosion that sends shrapnel flying in every direction. Several Orks are caught in the blast, but plenty of Imperials are too. It's a good shot by any measure. The Orks around them cheer. "The dead boss got the big shooty wagon. That's proper killy, that is." The warrior inside takes no satisfaction from the kill. They just destroyed an Imperial asset, killed Imperial crew, contributed to an Ork assault on an Imperial world. It doesn't matter that they didn't have a choice. It doesn't matter that refusing to fight would have been pointless. They're fighting for the enemy, and that's a sin that weighs heavily on their consciousness. But they're in the fight now, and stopping isn't an option. They advance across the battlefield, using their size and armor to draw fire away from smaller Orks. Las bolts spark off their armor harmlessly. Stub gun rounds ping against their chassis. Even autocannon fire, which would be deadly to Ork boys, is absorbed by their thick armor plates with minimal damage. They reach the Imperial trench line and the close combat becomes visceral. Their power claw activates, crackling with energy as the Ork modifications pump extra power into it. A guardsman tries to run, and they catch him with the claw almost reflexively. The crushing force pulverizes the man instantly, and the warrior inside recoils mentally from what they've just done. They've killed before, thousands of times, but always in service of their chapter, their legion, their mission. This is different. This is murder in service of Xenos, and it feels wrong on a fundamental level. But the battle is chaos around them, and they can't afford to freeze up or hesitate. Survival means killing, even if every kill is a betrayal. The flamer the Orks added to their wrist activates, washing fire over a section of trench. The screams are terrible, but mercifully brief. The warrior tries to tell themselves they're giving these soldiers a quick death, quicker than the Orks would provide. It's not much comfort. The battle rages for hours. The warrior fights alongside the Orks, killing Imperial soldiers, destroying Imperial equipment, contributing to an Ork victory they don't want. The modified weapon systems gradually become more familiar as their neural interface adapts. The movement becomes more natural as they learn the new weight distribution. They're becoming more effective, which makes everything worse because it means they're becoming a better weapon for the enemy. By the time the battle ends with the Imperials retreating and the Orks looting the battlefield, the warrior inside is numb. They've stopped trying to justify or minimize what they've done. They've killed Imperial soldiers. They've fought for Xenos. They've betrayed everything they believed in. The fact that they didn't have a choice doesn't make it hurt less. As the Orks collect their prizes and celebrate their victory, the warrior stands motionless among them, just another piece of equipment waiting to be returned to storage. Inside their sarcophagus, they're drowning in guilt and self-loathing. They're Alpha Legion. They're supposed to be better than this. They're supposed to find solutions, to turn disadvantage into advantage, to always have a plan. But there was no plan here. Just survival. Just killing. Just becoming exactly what the Orks wanted them to be. A weapon. And the worst part? It's going to happen again, and again, and again, until either they're destroyed in battle or the Orks get tired of them. Each battle will be another betrayal, another compromise, another piece of their identity ground away under the weight of circumstances they can't control. The warrior realizes, with crushing certainty, that this is their life now. Not forever, perhaps, but for the foreseeable future. They're a weapon in service of a Wah, and all their training, all their intelligence, all their secrets, all of it is meaningless in the face of that simple, terrible reality. They're broken, not physically. The Dreadnought chassis still functions. But psychologically, spiritually, they're breaking, and they don't know if they can put themselves back together. Possible outcomes and scenarios. The situation we've described could resolve in several ways, each with its own horrific implications. Let's explore the most likely scenarios and what they would mean for our unfortunate Alpha Legion warrior. Scenario 1. Death in battle. The most straightforward outcome is that the Dreadnought is eventually destroyed in combat. Orks don't exactly prioritize self-preservation, and a big, obvious target like a Dreadnought attracts a lot of enemy fire. Eventually, something with enough firepower would penetrate even their heavy armor. A Lascannon shot to the sarcophagus, a melter bomb placed by infiltrating enemies, or simply enough sustained damage to critical systems. For the warrior inside, death might actually be a mercy. It would end their suffering, their guilt, their forced service to the enemy. But it would also mean dying in Ork colors, fighting for Xenos, their final act being a betrayal of everything they believed in. They die unmourned by their legion, unremembered by their brothers, just another casualty in a meaningless Ork conflict. Worse, if their sarcophagus were recovered by the Imperium after the battle, it would be evidence of their betrayal. They'd be recorded as a traitor Dreadnought, their names stricken from whatever records might still exist, their memory cursed. The Alpha Legion might never know what really happened, might never understand that they were a victim rather than a willing turncoat. Scenario 2. Rescue by the Alpha Legion. It's possible, though unlikely, that the Alpha Legion might become aware of their situation and mount a recovery operation. The Legion has agents everywhere, some of whom operate independently for centuries without contact from the larger organization. It's conceivable that one such agent might encounter the Ork warband and recognize the modified Dreadnought for what it really is. If rescued, the warrior would face a complicated situation. They've been compromised by Xenos, operated their war machine in service of the enemy, and killed Imperial soldiers. Even if they were rescued, they might be seen as too tainted to trust. The Alpha Legion is ruthlessly practical about such things. They might extract whatever intelligence the warrior still possesses, then retire them permanently for operational security. Alternatively, the Legion might see value in their unique experience. An operative who's operated within an Ork warband from the inside would have invaluable intelligence about Ork tactics, technology, and psychology. They might be debriefed extensively, their knowledge harvested for future operations, then either redeployed or placed back into long-term stasis. The psychological recovery would be immense even if the Legion welcomed them back. They'd need extensive conditioning to process the trauma, the guilt, the identity crisis. And given how the Alpha Legion operates, that conditioning might involve memory modification, personality adjustments, or other interventions that would fundamentally change who they are. They might not survive the process with their identity intact. Scenario 3. Orc Warlord's Trophy. It's possible the Dreadnought could become a prized possession of the war boss, too valuable to risk in ordinary battles. Some Orcs collect trophies from defeated enemies, and a fully functional Dreadnought would be an impressive addition to any war boss's collection. In this scenario, the warrior might be kept in a semi-active state, displayed during war councils, or brought out to intimidate rivals. This would be psychological torture of a different kind. They'd be conscious but inactive, able to observe but unable to act, watching as Orcs celebrated victories they enabled and planned conquests they'd eventually facilitate. They'd be a living reminder of the Imperium's weakness, trotted out whenever the war boss wanted to prove their superiority. The advantage to this scenario is that it might provide opportunities for communication. If they're displayed before important Orcs, they might learn valuable intelligence about the warband's structure, leadership, and intentions. They might even find ways to influence Orc decision-making through careful manipulation of what they display and how they respond to commands. But it would require patience measured in decades or centuries, maintaining their sanity while serving as a trophy, waiting for an opportunity that might never come. Scenario 4. Mechanical degradation and madness. The most likely outcome for any Dreadnought, but especially one subjected to Orc modifications and forced to operate without proper maintenance, is gradual, mechanical, and psychological degradation. The organic components would fail slowly. The neural interface would accumulate errors. The machine systems would degrade from stress and poor maintenance. The warrior would gradually lose their mind, memories fading, personality disintegrating, until they became essentially what Chaos Dreadnoughts are: a screaming, mad thing trapped in metal, attacking anything within reach. The Orcs would probably find this improvement entertaining for a while, but eventually they'd get tired of chaining them down and would either scrap them for parts or use them as a disposable weapon in a suicide assault. This might be the worst outcome because it's a slow death, stretched over years or decades. The warrior would be aware of their deterioration, would feel themselves losing grip on reality, would know they're becoming something monstrous. And unlike Chaos Dreadnoughts, who can blame corruption, this would be pure degradation from neglect and trauma. Scenario 5. The escape. It's theoretically possible that the warrior could escape. During a particularly chaotic battle, when the Orcs are distracted and enemies are pressing hard, they might manage to break away. They could potentially fight their way to Imperial lines, identify themselves, and request extraction. But the problems with this scenario are numerous. First, they're in a heavily modified chassis painted in Orc colors. Imperial forces would almost certainly shoot on sight, treating them as an Orc war machine. Second, even if they could communicate their identity, they'd face immediate suspicion. A Dreadnought claiming to be Alpha Legion but operating Orc equipment? That sounds like exactly the kind of elaborate deception the Alpha Legion would use. If they did manage to escape and make contact with Imperial authorities, they'd likely be detained, possibly destroyed, on suspicion of being tainted. The Inquisition would certainly want to interrogate them, which would mean extraction from the sarcophagus, interrogation that Space Marines might not survive, and possible execution even if they're determined to be genuine. The best-case scenario for escape would be making contact with other Alpha Legion forces directly, but finding specific Alpha Legion operatives in the galaxy's vastness while being pursued by angry Orcs would be nearly impossible. Scenario 6. Reprogramming or conversion. There's a dark possibility that prolonged exposure to Ork culture, combined with the degradation of their organic brain and the constant reinforcement of Ork methodology, could actually affect the warrior's thinking. Not in the sense of truly becoming an Ork, that's biologically impossible, but in the sense of their identity fracturing so completely that they start to identify more with their current situation than their past. Stockholm Syndrome in the grimdark future. They've spent so long operating as an Ork weapon, following Ork commands, seeing things through Ork-modified senses, that their sense of self begins to blur. They might start to think in Ork terms, to see battles through Ork tactical logic, to unconsciously adopt Ork values. This would be the ultimate betrayal of everything they were, but unlike the active betrayals that concern them, this would be a passive erosion they might not even notice until it was too late. They'd still believe they were Alpha Legion, but their behaviors and thoughts would increasingly reflect Ork influence. The Alpha Legion trains their operatives to maintain cover identities for extended periods. The warrior might be too good at adapting to their cover, might internalize the role so deeply that they can't distinguish it from their real identity anymore. Scenario 7. Strategic utilization. There's one more possibility that's uniquely Alpha Legion, that the warrior might intentionally embrace their situation and try to turn it to strategic advantage. Instead of viewing themselves as a victim, they could reconceptualize themselves as an operative on the deepest, longest infiltration mission in the Legion's history. They could use their position within the Ork warband to gather intelligence, sabotage operations subtly, manipulate the Orks toward targets that serve Alpha Legion interests. It would require incredible mental fortitude to maintain this perspective while being forced to fight for the enemy. But if anyone could do it, it would be an Alpha Legion operative. This scenario requires the warrior to essentially create meaning from meaninglessness, to construct a narrative where their suffering has purpose. It might be self-delusion, a psychological defense mechanism to avoid confronting the reality of their helplessness. But if it keeps them functional, if it gives them a reason to survive and resist complete psychological breakdown, then perhaps self-delusion is the highest form of strategy available to them. They could work to ensure the Ork War targets enemies of the Alpha Legion, feed information to Imperial forces through careful manipulation of battle situations, or even engineer the War's eventual destruction from within. It would take years, possibly decades, but the Alpha Legion thinks in terms of centuries. The question would be whether they could maintain this perspective long enough to see it through, or whether it would eventually collapse under the weight of their situation, leaving them more broken than if they'd never tried to find meaning in the meaningless. Conclusion: a nightmare with no end. What happens when Orks capture an Alpha Legion Dreadnought that's been asleep for 2,500 years? The answer is a unique flavor of horror that combines physical suffering, psychological torture, and existential crisis in ways that are uniquely terrible, even by Warhammer 40,000 standards. The warrior inside experiences the complete loss of control that the Alpha Legion trains their operatives to never accept. They're stripped of their agency, their identity, even their basic ability to communicate or affect their own fate. They're forced to serve the enemy, to betray their principles, to kill those they should be protecting. The Orks, meanwhile, are having a great time. They've found a wonderful new toy, made it even better through enthusiastic modification, and are using it to great effect in battles. They have no idea they're torturing anyone because they don't even realize there's someone inside who can think and feel and suffer. This disconnect between the Ork perspective, joyful, enthusiastic, innocent in their own way, and the Space Marine perspective, horror, betrayal, grinding despair, is what makes this scenario so uniquely terrible. There's no malice here, no deliberate cruelty, just the cosmic joke of a being designed for perfect warfare, encountering beings designed for chaotic warfare, with the former completely at the mercy of the latter. For the Alpha Legion warrior specifically, This represents the complete inversion of everything they were trained for. They're supposed to be the ones in control, the puppet masters pulling strings, the operatives who see 3 steps ahead. Instead, they're the puppet, dancing on strings pulled by beings who don't even know they're pulling strings, unable to see even 1 step ahead because they have no control over what that step will be. The broader implications are equally dark. If this can happen to an Alpha Legion operative, someone with the absolute best training in maintaining cover and surviving hostile environments, then it can happen to anyone. Every Space Marine fears death in battle, but this is something worse than death. This is meaningless suffering without end, betrayal without choice, existence without purpose. And yet, in the grimdark future of the 41st millennium, this is just one small tragedy among billions. The warrior inside the Dreadnought is suffering in ways that would break ordinary humans instantly, and are slowly breaking even their enhanced physiology and training. But the galaxy doesn't care. The war goes on. The wah continues. One more Dreadnought, painted in enemy colors, fighting battles for the wrong side, is just another footnote in the endless scroll of the long war. If there's any hope in this situation, it's the possibility that the warriors' Alpha Legion training will somehow allow them to turn this around, that they'll find a way to escape, or to use their position for strategic advantage, or at least to die in a way that serves their legion. The Alpha Legion has pulled off impossible schemes before, has turned utter defeat into unexpected victory through century-long planning and patience beyond measure. But hope is a dangerous thing in Warhammer 40,000. More often than not, it's just another way to extend the suffering, another reason to keep fighting when surrender would be merciful. The warrior inside knows this. They know that hope might be just another form of torture, but they also know that hope is sometimes all you have. So they endure, they survive, they plan, however futile those plans might be, because that's what Alpha Legion does. They don't give up, they don't surrender, they don't admit defeat, even when everything is lost, even when they're trapped in an Ork-modified war machine fighting for the enemy, even when their mind is slowly breaking under the strain. They endure. Is it admirable? Is it tragic? Is it futile? Maybe all 3. But in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war and the laughter of thirsting gods, even futile endurance has a certain terrible grandeur. The Alpha Legion warrior inside that garish, modified Dreadnought will probably never escape, will probably never see their brothers again, will probably die in some meaningless Ork battle, fighting for the enemy against innocents who don't deserve their fate. Their suffering serves no purpose. Their sacrifice means nothing. Their story will never be told. But they were Alpha Legion. They served the Emperor, or Horus, or their own incomprehensible purposes, depending on which story you believe. They kept secrets that might have changed the galaxy. They fought in shadows for causes that transcended simple loyalty. And even in their darkest moment, even stripped of everything that made them who they were, they remained dangerous. Because the Alpha Legion never truly dies. The Hydra always has another head. Cut one off, 2 more take its place. And somewhere, somehow, in ways that can't be predicted or prevented, the legacy of this warrior will endure. Maybe not in the way they hoped, maybe not in any recognizable form, but the Alpha Legion remembers. The Alpha Legion plans. The Alpha Legion endures. And the Orks? They'll keep having fun with their new toy, completely unaware that they've done something that will echo through the centuries in ways they can't imagine. Because that's how Warhammer 40,000 works. The smallest action can have galaxy-spanning consequences. The briefest moment of suffering can be stretched across millennia. And sometimes, the greatest tragedies are the ones that go completely unnoticed by everyone except the person experiencing them. So if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the darkest scenarios I could imagine in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. We explore the lore of the grimdark future in all its terrible glory. finding the stories that might have been overlooked, the scenarios that exist in the spaces between the codexes, the nightmares that lurk in the implications of this fascinating, horrific universe. Until next time, remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and sometimes there are fates worse than death.